Shamus is Adventure meets Berzerk on a 1200 XL show. Hi, everybody. Welcome to 1200 XL. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron. We're back, baby.
That's right. We are back, and we're talking Shamus. You know, there's been who's the guy that's the MMA guy, Shamus something?
There's a wrestler called Shamus.
He's not MMA.
No.
Oh.
He's a big, huge redheaded guy.
I get him confused
big
with
Irish
Brock.
guy.
Who's tougher, Brock or Shamus?
Well, I would listen. If they were both standing here, I would just beat myself up and lay down. So I don't want to say they're both pretty tough. I mean, Brock is well decorated as a former UFC heavyweight champion, but Shamus is a big, huge, tall Irish killer. So I wouldn't want to fight either one of them both.
If you were gonna make your like sort of names of bruisers, would you put Shamus up there? Shamus just sounds like a tough guy to me.
Well, I mean, it's sort of one of those stereotypical names for someone around that area to me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the worst name. I don't know. I think more of like the detective type than I do like a killer type.
Detective Shamus.
You know, Shamus is like, isn't Shamus like it's another word for like cop or detective or something? Isn't it like a slang term or something?
This is the first I've heard this. I don't know much about Irish slang, so you'll have to school me.
Well, I mean, it's like I do. Maybe someone in the chat could back me up or call me an idiot. But I thought the word Shamus was another term for like a, you know, like flatfoot, or you know how they have, you know, if you're like listening to an old radio show from like the 40s, they're like, here comes a flatfoot, here comes a private dick. They get all these names. I think Shamus is also a one of those.
Okay,
but I could be crazy.
If you were gonna name a game, would you name a game after somebody's name? Would you name a game like Aaron?
You got that right. What a stupid question. Heck yeah. I'd be the star of that game, too. There'd be a whole lot of... I'd stomp everybody in that game. I wouldn't run around a maze.
I feel like from a marketing perspective, you can do better than naming the game after the dude.
Well, I didn't say it'd sell well. But I mean, if I had the chance, someone said, hey, you want a game named after you? I'd say yes. If they said, hey, do you want a game named after you, and you'll keep all the proceeds, I'd be like, I'd change the name. Something better. Like Space Aaron. Something like that.
Space Aaron is good.
Yeah.
Even like with like Super Mario Brothers, you got Mario in there. You got to put something. I guess they did have Mario Brothers though. As I look at the machine right next to me.
Bam. Spinny confirms it. Police officer slang. Count it. Look at that. I know more about the UK than you do, Boat.
You do, and I bet that you learned that from an old UK radio show. That sounds like something they'd say. Here comes the Shamus.
Probably, yeah. It was
like,
definitely an old TV show. But you got to think, in the old days, I've noticed this over the years, right? In the old days, like say 40s, 50s TV and radio, they use a lot of terms that are from Europe that we don't use anymore. But we must have used them back then. They just went away.
Yeah. I think people's vocabularies were much, much larger back than they are now. You can tell because when you look at the dialogue of old TV shows, it's like they're talking like college professors compared to the way that we talk now. It's crazy.
Well, there's a lot of crazy slang that we don't remember. You know, not to change the subject, but I wanted to talk about this tonight, and so why not now? I heard on the radio coming in that like Americans don't smell enough stuff. That's why. So
really,
they say we need to smell more because there's in some way that prevents memory loss.
Oh,
you know, they said the Europeans, people in the UK, they've got great smellers. They're smelling all kinds of crazy stuff. Over here, we don't smell nothing. You know.
I do know that smell is the sense that is most attached to memory. I remember reading that, so that does make sense. You need to smell a lot of things so you can remember more. I like it. I want to make that a goal.
So get this, Boat. They've got these, you know how you've got a gimmick in your house to like make it smell nice? Mm-hmm. You can get a bunch of these different things, and if you do it while you're in bed, bam, memory increase. I'm going to try it too.
Oh, man.
It would be interesting to know if certain smells helped you remember stuff better.
Do you have a favorite scent? Like when you're shopping for laundry detergent or some cologne or something, do you have something you just love smelling?
I like these, what do they call these little wax gimmicks that melt in the doodad?
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So I love these things, and I like the vanilla and like the brown sugar. I like
Okay,
that
so you
stuff.
like
That
a
sort of
sweet smelling thing.
like I'm a big fan of the vanilla ones, but like you can
Mm-hmm.
mix stuff in there too. I like those, but sometimes I'm in the mood for like something a little more fruity.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll put some tropical gimmick in there. So maybe I should have one of those near the bed.
Yeah.
You know,
You want to dream about a tropical sunset? Bam! Put the old fruit melter on there. You're good
it
to
would
go.
be funny if like really bad smells, like that's the ones that helped you remember stuff. So
I
at
hope
night
that's
you'd have
not
to
the
put like
case.
you'd have to put like the manure smell or the pasture in your thing. That would be great. If that was true, I've lived in a lot of houses where I would remember I'm like a tree. I never because they stunk. I've been to people's house. Usually people have lots of cats and stuff. I
Yeah.
wonder what their memories are like. Maybe they're smarter because of the stink. You never know.
Whenever I
Food
think
for
about
thought.
heavy smokers, I always think about whenever I used to go thrifting, and you always used to find the old NES that was just like caked with tar and
It was
nicotine.
yellow.
Yeah,
I wonder if smokers have better memories because they smell smoke all the time, or that just
Maybe so.
destroys your nose. Doesn't it?
it does. It does destroy your ability to smell. I know my dad had a hard time smelling his whole life because he spent his whole career at Institute, and Institute is the land of bad smells.
Yeah, he didn't
So-
smoke though, did he?
Oh, he smoked a pipe when he was younger, but I think it was mostly just being around all the chemicals and stuff. So
Hey,
he
Chemical
actually
Valley.
bought the last car that he bought. He bought it not knowing that it reeked of cigarette smoke. Like we couldn't even stand to be in it. We had to fumigate the car for 6 months before we could ride around in it. So
Here's before we move on to the actual show. Here's my challenge. If you're listening to this on YouTube or whatever, or even if you want to email us, I want you to write down what you think the best smell for good memory is. And give us some ideas, and then I will collect them, and I'll go get those smells at the store, and I will see, because I need memory help, Boat. So this is where everybody can help me. Memory
I
time.
love it. Let's talk about
I'll-
Shamus, Aaron.
I'll forget to check them, won't I? Here we go. Bam. Look at that, Boat. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, so Shamus, this is an action-adventure game that was developed by Catherine Mataga, who was formerly known as William Mataga at the time of this publication.
Oh, that's what threw me. Okay, I got
That's
it.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
At this time, William was the person, but now it is Catherine. This was published by Synapse Software in 1982. Of course, Synapse Software was an American video game development and publishing company founded in 1981. And it initially was focused on the Atari 8-bits. So that's why we got all the best ports coming out of Synapse, like Blue Max, Shamus. But then they focused on the C64 as a lesser secondary market, much as if the Commodore 64 is the secondary lesser machine.
Synapse turned heel on you.
That's
Brutal.
right. The company was purchased by Broderbund in late 1984, and they kept the Synapse label around for another year, but they retired that name in 1985. So Synapse existed from 81 until 1985. A little bit more about Catherine Mataga. She also designed Zeppelin for the C64. Which an interactive fiction game Mind Wheel. And she continues to be active in the port scene, Aaron. She ported Dragon's Lair to the Game Boy Color.
Oh,
And
that's
also-
amazing port too.
Yeah, and also worked on the the Game Boy Color port of Grand Theft Auto Advance.
Oh wow.
She is now the head of an outfit called Jungle Vision Studios, which is an independent development house. Other releases by Synapse included Necromancer, Rainbow Walker, which is an awesome game, Blue Max, shall we say more. They also did Fort Apocalypse, Alley Cat, and the Pharaoh's Curse. So Synapse
They were
was
all
firing
great.
on all
Yeah.
cylinders. Some of the
Yeah,
best
those
games
are
on
great.
the Atari 8-bits. Yeah. So Aaron, Shamus, when you fired this up, first of all, had you played this one before this go round?
Yes, I've got this for another machine, but I will say this has a different look and feel to it than the one where I played it previously, and and this game is very very Atari, so I enjoyed it. It sounds Atari.
Absolutely.
It looks Atari. It's very. I thought the feel of it. It was like slipping on an old slipper. Like you know what you're getting, Bode.
Yeah, yeah. So, what is this game? This is a flip screen shooter that I would say has very light or a light adventure game elements. And this was originally released on disc and tape. And this was the first big hit from Synapse. According to Synapse co-founder Ihor Wolosinko, Shamus made the company famous by giving it a reputation for quality. Of course, back in the day, you sort of, I don't know how you bought games, but I would always look and see who was publishing games, and sometimes that would affect my decision. For example, when I was buying games for the Nintendo, if a game was a Konami game, I was like, yeah, this is probably going to be good. If it was Capcom, yeah, probably good. LJN, no way. Acclaim, nope. I don't want any part of that. So did you look at publishers, or were you just, I guess you were pirating everything, weren't you?
I was going to say, the way I judged if a game was good or not is if it was available for free, and if I could have, my thing is, like, copy them all, sort them out later if they're any good. So no, I never did that.
Yeah. Shamus was actually followed by a sequel in 1983 called Shamus Case 2, also appearing on the Atari computer. I actually played Shamus 2 before Shamus 1, if you can believe it.
Yeah.
And there's also, we'll get into this later, it was also ported to the Game Boy Color. We'll take a look at the Game Boy Color version later on. So in Shamus, you are a dude. I'm guessing you are a private detective. This is all making sense to me now that I know that Shamus is slang for a detective.
Yeah.
That's why you got Case 1 and Case 2. You got mysteries. You got clues.
He's wearing a hat.
Yeah, that's right. You got the private eye hat. And Shamus, I guess, is a robotic detective. So he's not even a human detective. He's the detective of the future, a robot detective. Are you ready for the era of robotic detectives? I think we're getting close, Aaron.
I demand them. Trust me, I've met lots of real detectives. You can't get the robots ready quick enough.
I guess as long as they stay away from robotic breathalyzer techs, you'll be fine. But as soon as those come out, that's when you break out the whole what are those guys' names that broke up the spinning jennies back in the day? Now it's slang for people that don't want technology.
You got me, Boat.
All right, somebody in the chat will know.
One. I don't know what a spinning jenny is either.
So getting back to the game here, I would call this a Berzerk clone. Luddites, thank you, Spinny. This is a Berzerk clone with a twist. You have a huge maze. This is a 128 room maze of electrified walls, and the ultimate goal at the end of this journey is called the Shadows Layer. That is where you're going to face the final boss and hopefully complete the game. So what are some differences between Shamus and Berzerk? Well, Berzerk, of course, was a real early game.
Yeah.
I believe that there was no real background. It was just basically the walls, and your character and the robots were all sort of outlined against a black void. Is that right, Aaron?
That's pretty much right. That was Stern made that back in the day. It was one of their big hits, actually. Stern did that in Frenzy. And but I mean, it is very similar in a lot of ways, including the ability to leave whenever you want. Now, of course, the difference between this and that, I mean, amongst the bad guys and the way it looks, is that in that game, whenever you left a room, you just went to another room. In this, you got hallways and stuff like that. So there's a big difference here. This sort of reminds me, Boat, if I had to classify this, it would be like, what would happen if Berzerk and Montezuma's Revenge had a child? It would be this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very similar in a lot of ways to a non-platforming Montezuma's Revenge. It even sort of looks the same a lot of times. And it's the game that I never knew I wanted, but I want it because the marriage of the two things work together pretty well, I think, Boat.
Right, and like you said, this has got that Montezuma's Revenge persistent world. Berzerk, right. You were getting pretty much random rooms whenever you left the room, but in this you've got a world that is definitely mappable, and you're going to need to break out the grid paper if you want to get through this thing, because it is very confusing. There's items that you can collect. There's bottles. The bottles contain extra lives. You've got mystery question marks, which give you score, and you've also got keys, which open exits. So there's things to collect here.
I think the question marks can sometimes give you lives too.
Okay, so it's sort of like a mystery item, I guess.
Yeah.
And what are you up against in this game? Well, you're up against a ton of different robots, and the robots are named. They're named Spiral Drones, Robo Droids, and the demonic Snap Jumpers. What did you think about the enemy design on this one, Aaron?
It's different. I mean, you really have I guess they didn't want to make it just like Berzerk, and so you've got some. You do have some robots, but you've got some like, saw blade type enemies and some sparkly stuff. So they're different. They're different enough to make it not look like Berzerk, which is fine. And they act differently too. Some things rush you straight away. Some things shoot real fast. So it's nice to have different enemies to deal with. And you got to think Berzerk, it's got robots. So it had different colored robots. But they were pretty much all robots. So any variety is good variety.
Yeah, and of course in Berzerk, I think the robots were mostly sort of humanoid looking, right? And they look like all different kinds of things.
Yeah, they were sort of like boxy looking robots. Yeah. But the humanoid, yeah.
So when you get through each level, there's 4 levels of this game. The gameplay speeds up, and that makes the game more difficult because not only do the enemies come at you faster, but you also move around faster, which makes it more difficult to keep from running into walls. Walls, I found, are just as much of an adversary in this game as the monsters are, because what will happen is you'll be rushed by some robots. You'll be running to get out of the way, and before you know it, zap, just like a mosquito on a summer night running up against that electric thing, you get zapped and you're dead. It's game
Usually
over.
you're trying to dodge their bullets. Is what really, because then you're like more like panicky, and that's when you do the dumb.
Yeah. Now, you do have a weapon in this game. Now, Aaron, do you know what the weapon is called?
I don't. I have no idea.
It's called the Iron Shiv. Yeah.
Oh, not bad.
That's right.
It's no glaive, but
Well, listen, when you're a police officer patrolling Robotown, you're going to need some backup, and that backup comes in the way of an unlimited supply of iron shivs that you can throwing knife style at the robots, dismantling them. These robots all only take 1 hit to kill, and basically the gameplay involves clearing the room of enemies. You pick up special items on the way, and then you leave through the exit. Unfortunately, as soon as you come back to the room, the enemies are all back there, and you've got to do it again. So it's unfortunate, but that's the way that these old arcade game style games play.
I guess they sort of had to do it that way, because otherwise you just clear the whole maze and you can just sort of linger around for all time,
Right. And so in this game, just like Berzerk, if you just kind of hang around for too long on a particular level, the shadow will emerge and will jump towards you in a menacing way. If you manage to shoot the shadow, it's actually difficult to do. He'll freeze in place, which will give you a chance to escape, but you can't actually kill the shadow.
He's not very big either, and he gets around pretty quick. So even if you clear the area of robots or bad guys, if you're trying to grab a goodie or something, you're taking too long, he can get you. You can get yourself cornered real quick. He's this game's version of Evil Otto, basically.
Exactly. So, Aaron, we talked about the gameplay. What do you think of Shamus? Where does it rank in the pantheon of Atari 8-bit games?
I will say this before I rank it. It's funny. This is the second game I've played in a week that had the theme from the Alfred Hitchcock show as its opening title.
Oh yeah, we forgot to mention that.
This one makes a lot more sense.
Do you know what the name of that is?
I don't. I looked it up, but I don't remember it.
It's called March of the Marionettes.
There you go. It's funny because I played on ARG. We played Ambulance, and that makes a lot more sense for Shamus than it does Ambulance because Alfred Hitchcock had all kinds of private eye stuff on it, so it makes a lot more sense. So I thought that was kind of funny, though. What are the odds? But I like this game actually quite a bit. I can see why it was popular. I'm a big fan of Berzerk, so I like those sorts of games. I'm a big fan of this is a newsflash, I'm a big fan of the Atari 8-bits, and so I'm comfortable with the way this sounds and the way it looks. It's got the look, it's got the sound I like, the controls are pretty tight. I like the additional benefit that they baked in that you don't get in Berzerk, where you're searching around and you're looking for keys, and certain keys fit the doors, and when you open the lock, you get to move on. I like that idea. It's simple, but it works in a game like this. It gives you a little more depth, I like the fact that the rooms are numbered. they missed an opportunity here to do your favorite thing and name the rooms.
Yeah.
Like that would have been a lot of fun, but they didn't do that. They just have numbers and colors. But I mean, you can tell it's a big game. What I don't like about it is, unlike something like Montezuma's Revenge, like this game is so incredibly large that you're right. You have to sort of map it, and this is not the kind of game I want to set around a map, if I'm honest, because I just want to go shoot stuff and kill stuff. But you really do have to map it, or you'll never get to where you're going to get lost like every time.
Yeah.
Like I tried to just go real far, and I couldn't do it without mapping, and I didn't map.
This is a game that it's hard for me to give this an entirely objective review because this game played so much a part of my childhood.
Really?
I played this a ton.
Oh.
And it never once occurred to me to like break out some graph paper and try and like map this out. I don't know if I just didn't realize that the game was consistently the same all the way through or what, but I always just found myself dying before I probably made any significant progress. This is not the only version of this game. In much later years, this game received a port for the Game Boy Color. Let's take a look at this, Aaron.
Yeah, this is the weirdest port I can find, Bode. Just for you.
So this is the Game Boy Color version. What they've done is it seems like they've taken Shamus and they've made it more realistically proportioned.
Yeah.
But what they haven't done is compensated for the extremely low resolution of the Game Boy Color. So Shamus is like several stories tall, but the maze is the same size that it always was. So you can see you don't see very much of the screen at all. And in a game like Shamus, you really want to see as much of the screen as possible.
I will say the electrified walls look much more electrified.
That's true. That's true.
But I mean, I still prefer the look of the Atari by country mile on that boat.
Yeah, but it just goes to show, with the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance, how many old computer games were kind of resurrected from the obscure past to make a reappearance on the Game Boy Advance or the Game Boy Color. And there's been several games on ARG that have been like that too, where you're like, wow, that's weird.
Yeah, it is odd.
Yeah. So this game reviewed pretty well. Softline in 1983 says that Shamus is the best cross between arcade and adventure games currently on the Atari market. To know it is to love it, play it constantly, and not get enough of it. So Softline loved it. That year, Softline's readers named it the 7th best game on the magazine's top 30 list of Atari 8-bit programs. Electronic Fun gave the Atari version 3 out of 5. They called the graphics superb, and they said this doesn't look like it could ever get boring. So they loved it. And the kings were ROM Magazine, which I've never heard of ROM Magazine before.
I don't think I have either.
They gave the Atari version a 9.4 out of 10 rating. So
let me ask you a question real quick, Bo. Since you said you played the second one first. Because when I was looking on eBay to see what this is going for, and I saw a ton more of the second one than I did the first one. Is it similar? And was it more popular? Like, how would you assess the second
I do not think this game was more. I think that Case 2 was not as popular as the first one. According to Wiki, this game sold 60,000 copies, which is pretty good, for a game of its time. The second version of this game is very bizarre. It goes back and forth between a side-scrolling, almost Mario-type game where you're jumping over things. You've also got a weird overworld map that you have to traverse where you've got to avoid snakes. Almost like, think about something that looks like Dig Dug 2. And then also there's an Arkanoid mode where you go into some rooms and you have to play Arkanoid where you're firing straight up and knocking down insects so you can progress to the next level up because the game scrolls vertically and horizontally. It's probably the most bizarre computer game I've ever played.
It's funny, those old games like that, often there was a feeling that you couldn't come back with a game too similar to the original,
Right.
and you had to really
Right.
go nuts. And I'll talk about something like, say, though you mentioned Dig Dug 2 or Spy Hunter 2, and sometimes by going nuts, you miss the mark a lot.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, because that is an odd, but I mean, they thought they were doing the thing to move more units, I guess. And
Right,
what are you
right.
going to do?
We did get a couple Discord reviews this time. I pull them up here. Our first review comes from Shamus, or from Shamus himself, otherwise known as
Wow.
Pajako 6502. His nickname was Shamus. You didn't know that?
No.
He says, Shamus is as if Adventure and Berzerk had been mashed together in a transporter accident. A fun maze exploration and shoot 'em up game that has enough challenge to have you filling up the swear jar pretty quick. Now, there isn't much to see from the game. It's find the key, kill the baddies, and find the door game, but I found it fun. I didn't get too far because it's a tough game in places, and it's easy to panic and run into a wall or accidentally move while shooting and run into an enemy.
Yeah.
Like Berzerk, Shamus has its unkillable hunter, the Shadow, that comes after you if you hang around too long, so don't. The titular Shamus in some other versions appears to be rather inexplicably a cowboy shooting killer droids of some kind, but who cares? It was the 80s and this kind of thing was fine back then. It all runs really well, and the sound and graphics for an early 8-bit Atari game are pretty good. This could have been an arcade game for sure. One to try out if you enjoy games like Berzerk or Robotron. 8 out of 10. Lord Soup writes, Shamus on the Atari XL is one of my formative gaming experiences. I love it. Bajako's breakdown is succinct. 8 out of 10 for me, too. And finally, STE/W writes, while I and most of my school friends had a Speccy, one friend had an Atari 400. It seemed exotic at the time. Either after school or at lunchtime, we went to his house and played Shamus. Hearing the arcade-style sounds, so different to the beeper of the Speccy, was quite something. So playing this again so many years later, the game seems much simpler than I recall, but the sound effects hold up. The pokey shines here as your character blasts away or throws shivs, as the docs say. I checked out the C64 version. Although it's more colorful, the sound and gameplay is inferior to the Atari. A fun arcade adventure, 7 out of 10. That's the Discord reviews.
I don't think you're going to get this in the arcade, though, because, I mean, you'd have to... I wish this game would have actually shown a little restraint on the levels and put in, like, again, like Montezuma's Revenge. That's a game where you don't have to necessarily map and you can get through it. This thing is so... I mean, it's great if you want a sprawling game like that. But I don't think I've played a game like this that requires like that much mapping. I mean, maybe like something like a Turket or something. I mean, it is sort of maybe they were ahead of their time in some ways that you had to have, because I mean, you can get lost easily, and you can gather a bunch of keys and still be boned. Had to do a lot of backtracking.
Absolutely.
So it's an interesting game indeed.
Yeah. I looked this up on eBay. You can get this for $20 with the manual, so it's still very affordable. Like you said, all the Synapse Software games sold a lot. They're still out there. Some are going to cost more than others, but this one is definitely gettable for the collectors out there.
Absolutely.
All right, Aaron. Next time on 1200 XL, whenever that is, you came up with a great idea. Go ahead and open the curtains there.
Yes, sir.
Who knows what we're going to play? Well, guess what? We're going to tell you because you had a great idea. We're going to play Laser Gates. Laser Gates, a really unique and I believe possibly an Atari 8-bit exclusive. This is one of the greatest horizontal shooters available for the Atari 8-bit machines. Very colorful game, great sound effects, great mechanics. We will see you then on the next episode of 1200 XL. And until then, make sure you play
your Atari today. Do it.